Hello everybody, this is Ariane from La Fée de la Mer, handmade soap shop in the Magdalen Islands, Quebec, Canada. Today I will be making a whipped body butter. I've made a previous video on how to make those. I have changed my technique and I thought you might be interested to know how I make them now. So, for those who don't know what a whipped body butter is, it's a combination of mostly hard oils, butters, and soft oils whipped together. This one is fragrance free, it's natural, but I also have some scented ones, some with essential oils, so it results into a really creamy, it's not a lotion, there's no water in here, it's only oils and butter as I said, and there's vitamin E. So it's very, very creamy, very moisturizing, extra gentle on the skin. It's excellent for belly rubs if you have, like me, a little baby and growing in there and then your skin starts to stretch. It's also very good if you have dried hands and feet or any place on your skin that may be a little dry. The natural one and the lavender one you can actually even use on your face at nighttime if you have really dry complexion. So it's very polyvalent. My kids love it. They always smear it all over their faces. This is my daughter's jar. I use the unscented on my kids. And yeah, I'm gonna show you what goes in it and how I make it now. Alright, so let's talk about ingredients. What goes into my whipped body butter? The most important ingredient that I use is shea butter, and 50% of my whipped body butter is shea. So this is natural shea butter, and then I also add cocoa butter. I only use about 5% because this is very hard and brittle and very hard to whip, so you need to melt it down, so not so much. And then I also use some mango butter. This one I use in equal quantity as the cocoa butter, but I could put more, but just I like to have more shea than the other butters because it's such a nice butter to have. And then I use coconut oil, which is not a butter, it's an oil, but it's solid at room temperature. And this is for the hard oils and butter. I will also use jojoba oil and argan oil. So these two oils are two of my favorites to use, and argan is so nourishing and jojoba is more like a wax, so it doesn't leave that much of an oily feeling on the skin. I also, my rate, like many people ask me for my recipe, I don't give my recipe, although I gave you lots of pointers here, but I will use about 90% hard oils and butter versus 8% of soft oil, and then the rest will be vitamin E, fragrance, or essential oils, and then I will add a little bit of colorant and at least 1% of tapioca starch because it helps to make the lotion, not the lotion, but the whip a little less greasy on the skin and absorbs better. So now let's go ahead and see how I make this. What I do, and that I'm not showing you because it's already made ahead of time, I combine all of my ingredients that I've just shown you into a pot and I slowly melt it over very low heat on the stovetop. So I first put all my solid oils and butters, and when they're all melted down, I add my argan oil and jojoba and vitamin E. And then I made enough of this whipped butter base to make around 70 jars of 60 grams. So this is quite a large batch. And then I just transfer as I need into a cup that will later go to be whipped. So in order to make about 12 jars, I need to put 730 grams of my base in my cup. So I'm gonna go ahead and add my fragrance oil. This is my Sweet Kiss scent. I love it so much. I could literally eat it if it was allowed. So I'm adding 2%. of my total recipe. There we go. And then I will add my mica. And I have this little cute spoons from Nurture Soap Supplies that I'm using. So I'm using 1 teaspoon, which is about 2 grams, of the pink vibrance. There. So I don't want to overcolor. I just want to tint my base, and then I will add the tapioca starch, which is 10 grams for my recipe here. There. All right. Working on a scale, oh, you couldn't see the scale, but working on a scale is very easy because you don't need to measure anything, you just slowly add it. And now I will be transferring to my KitchenAid. All right. Make sure everything is locked and nothing's moving, and I'm gonna start by stirring slow. Just because I don't want the mica and the tapioca starch to poof up into my face. Now this is the fun part. It's like making whipped cream, except you can't taste it. Alright, so I scrape the sides, lock it back, and whip again. I do this process several times just to make sure that everything is very well incorporated and that everything is nice and fluffy, and this is what gives it the amazing texture on the skin. When it's extra whipped, there's like air incorporated into the mix, and then it's I don't know how to explain, but you'd have to try it to find for yourself, to see for yourself. Alright, so when I'm ready to jar up, what I did is I cleaned my surface, my work surface, with rubbing alcohol, and I spray down each of my jars, each of my caps, and then I also clean my spoon and my hands with rubbing alcohol. There's no water in this, but there's no reason for, extra germs and icky things to get in there. And to wipe them down, I use medical wipes that are lint free, so they won't leave any residue in my jars or on my utensils. Look at this, how nice and creamy this is. It's just like whipped cream. Yummy whipped cream for your skin. So I have my scale here. I've already tared it to 0, so if I put a jar on it, it goes back to 0, and then I fill up every jar and I make sure that I have at least 60 grams into each. And when I fill it up, I just make sure that there's no air bubbles, or not too many at least. It's pretty hard to have 0. And I tap it down also to remove air bubbles, because this jar, filled to the top is about 62-63 grams. So I really need to use all the space that there is in there to fit what needs to go in. Alright. And let's check this one. Oh, that's 68. There's a little too much. I'm going to take a little bit out. 66. 65 is good. I label it at 60, but I always add a little more because I love ya. So all my jars are packed, and I try to be the less messy that I can when I fill up my jars. I try to keep my hands free of the whipped buddy butter, because if you start having it on your hands, then it gets all over the jars and then the labels don't stick so well. But of course there's always a little bit on the edge. So before I cap it, I clean every jar and I remove the extra butter from around the opening. There. Each label is then printed right here in my workshop, cut by hand, and then placed on the jars one by one. We don't have any labeling system, so everything is done by hand. Okay, so we're all done making this whipped buddy butter. The sweet kiss that I just made for you guys is my personal favorite. If this was edible, I would eat it, but instead I put it on my skin and I scraped the bowl as much as I could to fill up the jars. But this part here is always a little more complicated to clean up, and so most of it doesn't go in the jar. But you may be wondering what I do with this. Well, I test for quality, of course, so this will go on my arms, on my hands, because they're really dry at this time of the year. It's spring, but outside it still looks like winter, and I wash lots of dishes in my soap shop, so my hands are dry. So yeah, quality testing. The whipped buddy butters melt right onto the skin. They are so moisturizing, and of course I'm keeping some for my baby belly a little later on today. Hope you've enjoyed, and thanks for watching. Have a great day.